Hope you're having a great day. Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio, where we celebrate so many incredible people working across the state of Mississippi to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. Hey, listen, I came across a quote this morning in my digital history book, and it was most people remember Christopher Reeve, the Superman actor. He was born back in 1952. And after his terrible accident, which left him paralyzed, he went on to do a lot of important things in his life. And along the way, he said this: "I think a hero is an ordinary individual who finds the strength to persevere and endure in spite of overwhelming obstacles." I think, when I think about Mississippi and how resilient we've been from hurricanes and floods and tornadoes and so many other things, I've had the opportunity to personally witness people doing incredible things, enduring incredible obstacles to find strength and do amazing things. And I often say that's one of the reasons why Mississippi is so special, is that we are incredibly resilient. And when the going gets tough, it doesn't really matter what our political persuasions are. We have this innate ability to reach out to our neighbors and help them. And I'm touched when I read quotes like that from Christopher Reeve, because it's a wonderful reminder to me of why I love Mississippi and why I love living here. Well, a guy who knows a lot about that, because he travels the state a lot. If you follow him on social media, you know he likes to be out and about with the people. Is our current Mississippi Secretary of State, Michael Watson. I always enjoy visiting with Michael and checking in to see how he's doing. How you doing, Michael?
Man, I'm great. I'm actually coming off, I don't know if it's the flu or what, but I'm on day 3 of recovery, so I feel a lot better than I did a couple of days ago. And to your point, I love being around Mississippians, just some of the best people in the world. And I've told this to folks often now. I actually still live on the coast. I'm in Jackson 2 to 3 nights a week. We've got a condo up there, actually a little apartment. But I think one of the things that's really good about that is I'm still at home around regular folks, and I don't get caught up in that Jackson bubble. And it just, for me, it reminds me who I work for and why I'm in this business, this business of politics, to represent people and to answer to them. So that's always a plus for me, just to be around regular folks here at home on the coast. And it's great to represent them in Jackson.
It's so easy to get caught up in it, man. There's machines. Of course, in this incredibly dynamic, I guess you can call it that, presidential race that we're all being polarized into corners about. We all watch these machines as they work, and people lose their identities. They lose their sense of right and wrong. I mean, it's crazy to watch it, but that's just, too many politicians get caught up in that. What I've noticed about you is, especially as Secretary of State, getting out and visiting. I guess you've been maybe every county by now, Michael.
All 82.
And
every one of them.
There are a lot of statewide political officials who cannot say they've been to all 82 counties. But you have always made that a major priority, and it's helped you sort of stay in touch with what Mississippi is all about, and you didn't want to be insulated. And what has driven that?
Yeah, a couple of things, Rick. I think when I'm in the state Senate, there were 52 of us, and I understood that no one individual could get anything off that Senate floor without building a team. I'm a lawyer by trade. I understand you want to be around experts. So kind of those two things combining, it really led me to announce we're going to all 82 counties. We're going to visit with our circuit clerks and our elections commissioners, because elections are hard. And a lot of work that happens behind the scenes no one ever really knows about. But the folks that do that hard work are our commissioners and our clerks. So making sure that I go see every one of them and getting to sit down in their office and tell them, hey, I'm here to make your job better. What are the things that I can do as Secretary of State to work better with you, to make it easier to do your job? In turn, we all get better with this elections process in our state. I want you to trust me. I want to trust you. So when you have issues, you can call me and say, hey, Michael, look, I think this is an issue that we need to attack either legislatively, by regulation at the Secretary of State's office, or something that we're seeing differently handled in other counties. how do we make that better? So having those relationships, and sometimes we're going to have hard conversations, but when you have a friendship on the front end, it's much easier to have the conversation. And look, when we're having relationships with D's and R's and independents, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what your background is. Whoever has the best idea, that's what should win the day. I don't care where it came from. So having relationships, understanding what's best for the people of Mississippi, with those friendships across the aisle, I think that's really important to get back to. And we're seeing it now, Ricky. The toxified nature of politics is awful. And getting back to relationships is how we get this thing fixed, in my opinion.
Well, listen, I'm lucky in this show that I have the opportunity to talk to a wide range of people. And, I would say, like probably the most spirited discussions I have about the role that social media plays in politics usually happens with mayors, hyper local, with hyper local issues and how vicious it can be and how difficult it can be. I've had that numerous times on the air. I've had that numerous times. One of the things I wanted to go check, because I do follow you, on Facebook and other social media. I know that you've been involved in some issues. We've had deep discussions about Toddlands and all of that, and it's okay to have different points of view about that.
Right.
But to the extent that the public gets worked up, like they would in a hyper local issue that maybe a mayor would have to deal with, I don't remember seeing. I'm sure that you see it. You see it because you're there. You feel it, where that vitriol has been aimed at you, but. How do you assess, as Secretary of State, how difficult it can be at times to try to do your job in a world of misinformation?
Look, that's a great question. I could talk for a long time on this one. I will say this one was kind of set up where you had my predecessor, who was from Vicksburg, but obviously moved to Jackson and was the Jackson guy, who didn't get along very well with Biloxi. And I don't think it was his fault alone. I think that probably was on both sides. And then I think they saw, look, we got a coast guy coming in. We'll do whatever we want to do. And that coast guy, unfortunately, is one that follows the law and doesn't play good old boy politics. And so I give a lot of credit to Fofo. I like Fofo. I think Fofo is a good person. He's fun to be around. He's a fun guy. And I give a lot of credit to Fofo for standing his ground and fighting what he believes is right for Biloxi. I can't fault him for that. At the same time, when a friend of mine is going to the Biloxi Businessmen's Club to go speak, and the advice that person is given is just say, when you get up there, just say you hate Michael Watson and you're going to do fine. There's something wrong there. I don't take this personally. This is business for me. I love the Mississippi Gulf Coast and want nothing more than to have a great and prosperous coast, because that's what drives the entire state, in my opinion. So, it stinks because you get a headline out there that's incorrect and people just grab it and run with it. And that's unfortunate. Just yesterday on Twitter, we got a complaint from an individual here in Mississippi. I got the recording of her Ring doorbell of what was said. So I knew exactly what happened. And I addressed it on social media, and I was automatically said, well, you're taking a false story here and blowing it out. Well, wait a minute, bud. I heard the actual, interaction. And so that's the problem. People just automatically assume, well, it's all fake. You're just lying. Again, the toxicity of politics goes back to people who don't care to be honest. They care to win. Is it about winning or is it about being right? And I think that's the hard part. So even when it boils down to a local issue, sometimes your local guy, just happens to be the one that's going to be in the crosshairs because he doesn't line up specifically with just what you want. Doesn't matter what's best for the state. That this is an issue that is very regional in nature. And so Biloxi wants best for Biloxi, and I do too, but I got to balance that with what's best for Belmont, and every other part of this state, not just Belmont, just picking one out because it's a B, and that's what Haley Barbour used to do. So, it's a tough issue for us, though.
Well, so, speaking of Haley, he and I talked about this. We still do talk about this, that things can be incredibly partisan, but if you work to build relationships, that you can overcome some pretty tough issues. Jason White and I have had, conversations about his approach, and, he's a Republican, but he also is someone who has an open mind, and he's willing to to have conversations. And he often says that it's hard to be mad at somebody that you know. I think that, I just think that's a great way to go about it.
It is.
As a former publisher, man, I can so relate to all of that. In any given day, lots of people might be upset with the Sun Herald or the Times-Picayune or the Mobile Press Register and any other number of newspapers I had responsibility for in my career. But what I found is, let's take the Biloxi Businessman Club, for example. That's a tight-knit group of men that come together weekly. But I always found that if there was anything they were confused about, or maybe they wanted to know more about, the way to hit it, just go meet with them and let them ask you whatever questions they want to, and they can see that I'm sincerely trying to express the point of view and whatever, and usually it works. And in most cases like that, it usually works. Well, actually, we'll continue this when we get on the other side as we continue our conversation with Michael Watson, the Secretary of State from Mississippi, after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. We're visiting with Secretary of State Michael Watson, and when we went to break, we were just talking about it's sometimes difficult to be in political life in this kind of polarizing world that we're in. And part of the reason why that's so difficult is that social media companies make money when we're fighting with one another. They make money, and their algorithms are set up so that there's engagement, and typically it's engagement around things that we disagree on. That's sad. They make money when we're divided. That's the reality of the world we're in. But when you're in, statewide politics or local politics, maybe, sometimes the best way to handle things is just go face it straight up and make it, as Jason White pointed out, the current Speaker of the House, is a scenario where there's a relationship, and it's hard to be mad at somebody that you're friends with, and it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. I think that's right, and I was just mentioning that. I found some of the most productive times for me as a publisher when I went to speak to groups that may have had issues with something that we were doing as a company, and I just go face it. I was pretty good at taking the music. The reality was I believed in what we were doing, and I knew that sometimes it was going to be contrary to maybe what some readers wanted or some community leaders wanted. Then my goal was to go explain what I had a vision for, what I felt strongly about. And if we still disagreed after that, that's fine. That's what the world is all about. But maybe they won't hate me as a leader because they've gotten to know me better, and they know that I'm willing to face the music. Well, that's what you do too, isn't it, Michael?
That's my nature, and I've been to the Biloxi Businessmen's Club. I haven't been invited back since, but I don't mind that. I remember one time when I was in the state Senate, we were talking about education funding, and I was one of the, I guess, I don't know if you call it dummies, or just really felt like I needed to do my job and respond to every email I got. So I did. And I challenged one teacher one time, and it was somewhere in Gulfport West. I can't remember the name of the small elementary school there. But I told her, look, I'll come and talk to your group of teachers, expecting her not to respond. She did. She said, well, fine, give me some dates. And so sure enough, I went. I get there, Ricky, and there's a sheriff's car outside. I'm like, oh, my gosh, what am I doing here? And walk in, and about an hour and a half later, and it was a crowded room. It was fantastic. Now, we get through, and they didn't still agree with me, but they understood how I looked at an issue, or that issue specifically, and why I voted like I did. I didn't represent these folks. But at the same time, you know what? These are Mississippians, and they need to understand why policymakers make the decisions that they make. So I went to that school, and from there got some great friends and still have those friends. Again, we didn't necessarily agree, but having believing in what I believe in and understanding what I believe in, I'll take that anywhere. It doesn't matter to me. If you don't like me, we can still talk about policy, and hopefully we can build relationships through that.
Yeah, I think it's so important. There's so many lessons like that I can recall. I'll just give you one other quick example. We wrote an editorial once about some big economic development project that was going to happen around I-10 and 49, but it was going to affect the Turkey Creek community. And we wrote the editorial, and I felt like for the most part, we were right about that, but it lacked total empathy, to be honest with you. and it lacked an awareness of what the Turkey Creek community was going through from a flooding point of view. And so Felicia Dunberg reached out to me. She was a leader in the community, and she brought several people to the table, citizens of Turkey Creek and others. And we had an editorial board where we sat and just listened. And when we got done, never after that, and all of for my rest of my tenure at the Sun Herald and my work in New Orleans and Mobile and across multiple states, never again did I ever write an editorial without also giving the other side an opportunity to come in and tell their point of view. Sure. And that doesn't mean we would change our editorial, but sometimes it did mean that we changed our editorial. Sometimes it meant we didn't write an editorial. But gosh, man, we get to moving so fast, we don't always listen to all perspectives. And that was a big learning for me. And it actually helps me in this show, to be quite honest with you, because I want to listen. I want to hear people's perspectives. And we can get closed-minded, especially in the world of social media today, and not listen to the other side. And we should be way more attentive to that, shouldn't we?
I agree, and I'm trying to get a lot better about that myself. And, look, I'm a fiery guy. I know what I believe in, and I'm happy to fight for it. So sometimes, to your point, yeah, we kind of jump, and we really could probably do a little bit better if we just hit the pause button for a bit. And I've gotten a lot better about, before I send the email, let me read about it. Let me read it again before I hit the send button. But that's part of growing up and part of maturing. And
hey, listen, I found a book. I read a lot, and Roland did a great job of sending me all over the country to some of the best training in America before I became publisher of the Sun Herald. But I learned about a book from one of the guys I met on one of the training efforts that I was involved in. The name of the book is a small book. It's about how to be a CEO. That's what it was. And it was how to be a CEO in your life, how to be a CEO in your community work, how to be a CEO in your business, But it was a really good book. And it was just like small lessons. And one of the lessons in this book, I remember so many lessons from the book because I kept the book and I referred to it regularly, because it really helped me once I became a CEO. But one of the lessons was write that important letter. This is even before email. The book was written before email was a reality. Write that important letter and put it in your top drawer for 2 weeks. If in 2 weeks you pull it out, it's still important, send it. Boy, we could take that advice today, couldn't we?
Gosh, yeah. No doubt. And just, it's the gotcha news media. It's the, man, I gotta defend myself. It's the, I've learned a lot from my wife as well, and really about social media. And sometimes it's just best to be quiet and let the facts come out, and then you can respond. And I think that's, to your point, really important for all of us. And I think that couples with building relationships is really how you fix this thing. Hey, look, let's not be so knee-jerk. And I'm preaching to myself, so don't get me wrong.
I get it.
Let's not be so knee-jerk. Let's build relationships. Let's work through these things together. And from my travels across this state, I'm telling you, Ricky, there is so much more that we agree on than disagree on. And one of my favorite dinners every year is with Kenny Wayne Jones. And by the way, he'd be great to be on your show. He's hilarious. But Kenny Wayne's a Democrat, and we disagree 9 times out of 10, typically probably on different pieces of politics. But it's one of my favorite dinners every year, because we just get to sit back and we'll talk politics without being angry at each other, and just talk about our families and talk about what's going on in our lives. And I think those are the relationships that are going to build this state moving forward, and they're so key to us moving forward as well.
It really is, man. It's kind of easy to just say, I'm going to toe the party line and that's going to be it. And I'm going to have these think tanks over here, and they're going to help me think, learn how to think about this. And that's what I'm going to do. And that's how I'm going to get elected. I'm going to raise a bunch of money, and then I'm going to go do it. It's harder to have to get out there and see people and look at them in the eye and hear their point of view and see what's important and what's not important. Kenny Wayne Jones, right? Why don't you send his contact information to Cammie, our producer, and I'll invite him to be on the show. I'd love to.
You'll love him. He's fantastic.
I love to chat with people like that. So, man, we're in election season. It's, gosh, so difficult. I had a great conversation yesterday, incidentally, with Jordan Doran here. He's got a podcast, and he works with John Carter on Carter's Champions, raising money and all this stuff. He's just a kind of good salt of the earth guy, but he one of the things he's developed along the way is this kind of clarion call. And his point is that if you're complaining about anything in public life and you're not registered to vote, shut up. That's essentially his point of view.
That's fair.
But he makes the point that, as he becomes more aware of how the political process works and how few people are exercising their right to vote. As the Secretary of State, I mean, you've dedicated your whole existence on that. But it is frustrating that we don't have more people. We have some of the loudest people in the world don't vote. It's crazy, isn't it?
It is. And I'll tell you, we've got about 85% of those that are eligible to register to vote in Mississippi register to vote. It's a big number. Matter of fact, probably one of the bigger ones in the country. Yet we still see such low turnout. And that's so frustrating to me. And a lot of things that we try to work on, obviously, are going to our schools. We have our Promote the Vote program. We have our ambassador program where we have 70 of the smartest, brightest kids in the state of Mississippi. Every one of them do voter registration drives in the high schools. We do our voter registration road trip where we go all across this state. We'll be at Murrah High School soon. We'll be at Millsaps. We'll be at Delta State, Mississippi State. We've been all over the place, literally. High school football games, you name it. Preaching the word of understanding the importance of being registered to vote, to have your voice heard. That's where it all happens. And I've told people, I was in Starkville, I guess about 2 weeks ago, Ricky, talking to their athletic leadership group. And I said, look, a great example. You don't have to like either one of these candidates, but what you are really probably keyed in on is NIL. Why don't you look at which position these two, candidates offer or talk about with NIL that's going to impact you, that you appreciate more, and vote for that person. Vote for the policy. You don't have to like the person. I get it. I wish we could. I think that would be in the best of all worlds, somebody we really wanted to go vote for because we like them and their policies. But when you don't like somebody and you don't want to vote for them because of their personality, it's still very important to understand the policies because that's what's going to impact your life. And so that's what I try to tell those students. Look, even if you don't like the people, look at the policy. And lastly, think about, those young men, that are going over to Europe in World War II. That gate slings open and the machine guns are rolling. They probably got a good understanding that they may not make it, but they cared enough to lay their life down for you to have that freedom. Man, come on. If that don't get you to go vote, something's wrong.
It will. Hey, after this break, we'll continue our conversation with Michael Watson. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I have my friend Michael Watson, the Secretary of State from Mississippi. Always enjoy visiting with him. And we never know where the conversations are going to go. They're not pre-planned. He doesn't send me bullet points. None of that. It's anything goes, and it's always terrific to have the opportunity to visit with him. When we went to break, though, we're talking about people exercising their right to vote, and the fact that we're around 85% of Mississippians that could vote have been registered. That's a really good number, actually. We just need more people to go and vote. Michael, one of the things, you and I have talked about this before, but it is a national conversation. And I know there's a lot of political reasons why we can't get our arms around this, but who wouldn't be for, number one, you have to be a U.S. citizen to vote. Number two, you got to show an ID to vote so we can be sure there's one person and one vote. What? Mississippi's done that. Why can't we get a nation aligned around that? I know I know that's such a politically charged question. But why is it a politically charged question? It shouldn't be.
And that's the point. It shouldn't be. That's just common sense. The citizens of our country should be the ones directing the future of our country. Mississippi is one of the leaders on making sure that you had proof of citizenship to register to vote in our state. We got that passed back in 22. And it's fun now, Ricky, when states are calling us to say, hey, will you come speak to our leadership team and tell us kind of how you got that done and how it works and why that's important. Mississippi's at the tip of the spear on that issue. And I'm so proud of the work that we've done with our legislative friends. Look, we couldn't get it done without them. But having the fortitude, we talked about it in 2019 on the campaign trail. And I remember at that point in time, there were some school board elections, I believe, out in San Francisco, and they were allowing non-citizens to vote. And I thought, man, what in the world? Yeah, California's crazy, but if it's happening there, at some point in time, it's going to matriculate around this country. We need to hit this head on. And that's exactly what we did. I had so many people say, Michael, that's not necessary. Well, look at it now. It was absolutely necessary, and I'm glad we did that. But it shouldn't be an issue. And I think the attack is from really a national perspective is perhaps, the left tries to move to get these folks to be eligible voters. And that's just not good for the future of our country. And so we're going to fight it tooth and nail here in Mississippi.
How do you know? How does the average person know what's true as it relates to that? Because Democratic leadership in our nation, they're not hitting it straight on. They avoid direct discussions about, are they literally injecting non-citizens into the battleground states? I mean, is that true? I mean, how does the average citizen even sort through any of this?
Right. And I don't think it's just battleground states. We saw the article recently in Sylacauga, Alabama. You may recall, I think it was probably last year, maybe year before, there was a planned, I think it was 90, if I remember correctly, non-citizens were going to be dropped off in Natchez, Mississippi at the train depot, at the bus station, wherever it was. We got wind of that on the front end and got it stopped. But that being said, I think if you look at this from a national perspective again, if you can turn some of these dark red states into a little bit lighter, and who knows what happens. And I'm not saying this is what is happening, but it kind of looks sort of maybe what's happening. So we got to be very careful with that, and our eyes, our head is on the swivel. And that's the problem with politics again. And I could talk about it all day. Look at the debate. When someone asks questions, nobody wanted to answer the question. It's always, how do I attack this other person to make them look bad? Why don't you tell me your policy decisions and your policy approaches to what's going to make this country better? And people just don't, I'm not saying those candidates, but in general, we just don't see a lot of honesty in politics. And I can't stand that. My folks get mad at me all the time because I'm too honest.
The dishonesty is at a feverish pitch. It's more so now than ever. And the average person sees it, but they're not, what they don't see and what they don't understand and what they probably can't understand, because there's so much we still don't know, is the layers that are going on behind the scene to try to protect whatever the perceived status quo is for whatever big donor or governmental entity or whatever. I mean, when you think about that, I mean, it's really kind of powerful machines that are pushing forward in so many different ways. How do we even sort through it, man? I mean, it's hard, right, isn't it?
And look, I'm not attacking Kamala at all. But if you look at her polling numbers from a few months ago when they were just, in the 20s maybe, and now up at 50, President Biden gets kind of pushed out, whether you like it or not, whatever happened there. And now her polling numbers are, just over 50%. How does that happen without a machine behind it? It's...
Including a dishonest media.
Yeah.
And me having come from media, it's hard for me to say that, but it's so true. It just, again, how does the average person sort through it? How do they sort through it? And what ends up happening is they just lean one way, and that's where they're going to stay. And if I'm an independent in the world, and that's, again, I think most people come to realize this, that a few independents, a few undecided voters in some really key states, maybe one or two, maybe even, are going to decide this presidential race.
They're going to swing it. That's exactly right. We're doing a Trusted Info 2024 campaign right now with the National Association of Secretaries of State. And basically, Ricky, to your point there, that the thrust of this is when you see something out there that you're just not sure if that's true or not, reach out to one of your election officials, be it the Secretary of State's office, be it your circuit clerk, be it your commissioner at the local level there, even on down closer to the people, and making sure that you're getting trusted information when it comes to elections. We've gotten reports, obviously, from Iran and Russia and China and different other actors that are trying to sow discord and do other things with social media, and they're going to try to have an impact on the election, I'm sure. But that's the key piece there. If you hear something in public, if you see something online, if you hear something in the news, something that just doesn't sound right, please reach out to us and let us make sure that you're getting trusted information. And that's really important when it comes to elections.
Yeah. Hey, listen, this is interesting. My son, Justin, lives in New York City, works for Price Waterhouse. He's in Munich, Germany, as we speak. But he lived in Texas for a period of time, and Alabama, and Atlanta, and now in New York. Well, he gets voting information from multiple states. How do you police that?
So we had a circuit clerk I think it was in the 2020 election, got an absentee ballot from Michigan for her deceased mother-in-law. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And I'll tell you, to your point there about different states, one of the things that we've been doing is signing memorandums of understanding. We've got them with all of our surrounding states now, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee. That's the kind of the group that's working together. We did our first run with Alabama, Ricky, and we got 7,000 hits, meaning there's 7,000 folks that are registered in both Alabama and Mississippi. And let's just take that to the extreme. Say 7,000 of them, say all of them live in Alabama. That means you got 7,000 names on the voter registration rolls in Mississippi, and people don't even live here.
Yeah.
That's where it starts to, wait a minute now, we got to make sure we got clean voter rolls. And so we're working really hard on that. It's been a focus of our administration. But now that we have this new tool, we're working with these other states, you're going to see a lot more folks coming out the voter rolls. And again, that's the cornerstone of election integrity in my mind, is making sure you got clean voter rolls. So to your son's experience, he's not the only one.
Yeah, it's actually kind of frightening when you think about it. And as a farmer, I had operations responsibility and IT responsibilities early in my career, so understand how the whole notion of database management works. But you would literally have to do merge purges on a national level with a claimed state, which, the technology is there to do it.
Right.
But I don't think we're ever going to get agreement that we need to do such a thing. But it seems like we should do that because, there could be countless examples of people voting in multiple states.
And there are. And that's one of the things that we hope with this new tool that we put together, we're going to see that. And if somebody votes doubly in Alabama and Mississippi, we're going to have the records now to go track them down and prosecute them. And I think that's what it takes is prosecuting election crimes. And when you start doing that, people are going to start paying attention. Unfortunately, we've not had good luck so far of getting our cases that we've sent over to the AG's office prosecuted. I've got some recent communication that maybe that's starting to get better. So hopefully it does. But without that, folks just going to turn their eye and say, well, so-and-so didn't get prosecuted, so I'm going to do it too. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, I hate to hear that. Listen, one of the big responsibilities you have, I love to do my outdoors show because, as I say all the time, Mississippi is the capital of the outdoors in America for a lot of reasons. I just think we're so lucky to live here. But you have massive responsibility for public land and lots of work. So we could get bogged down on all these other issues, but boy, that's a big part of what you do, isn't it?
It is. And look, Bill Cheney is phenomenal. Look, Ray Carter here on the coast. Ray is a legend. We call him the professor at the office. He just knows Tidelands law backwards and forwards, and so really happy to have him. But to that point, and I've told you this before.
Hey, Michael, let's do this. I didn't realize we're getting to the end of the segment. We'll pick it up right there with the public land aspect of the Secretary of State's office with Michael Watson when we come back after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. We're visiting with the Mississippi Secretary of State, Michael Watson, someone I enjoy spending time with here on this show on a regular basis. But, when you look at the role that a Secretary of State plays, you do have to hit on a bunch of different cylinders. And you might remind people sort of all the areas that you're involved in. But before we went to break, the public land side of it is really important. You can land on that. But why don't you kind of go do a quick circle around the responsibilities and come back to the public land discussion?
Yeah, I love doing this, Ricky, for two reasons. One, I think it's important that people know, hey, if I need to get some help in this area, who do I talk to? And number two, if something's going wrong in one of these areas, who do I hold accountable? And I think that was probably the more important one. But first and foremost, obviously elections, the face of the office. Mississippi is what's known as a bottom-up state, which means the real heavy lifting is done at your circuit clerk and your elections commissioner's office. We help train them. We help kind of walk them through the law when they have questions about the law. We house the statewide election management system. So all of your voter registration data is held at the Secretary of State's office. So that's one of the big roles we play in elections. And again, it's a team job. You can't run elections without having a great team across the state. So I give a lot of credit to our circuit clerks and our elections commissioners for that part. Second piece is business services, and that's really where the breadth of the office comes in. So if you've got a corporation, an LLC, a nonprofit, a charity, a sports agent, perpetual care cemetery, a scrap metal dealer, the list goes on, you're going to come through our office and register your business. You're also going to have to file compliance pieces if you're, say, a charity or a nonprofit. Some of the things we work with through nonprofits, or securities, another piece through our business services. So that's really where the breadth of the office kind of opens up. And then lastly, as we were talking about, public lands. So 16th section lands, which helps fund public education, as you well know, tax forfeited properties, which is a really big conversation of late in Jackson and other areas of the state. And then lastly, tidelands, which we have here along the coast, which is really important to the coast. And a lot of folks north of Mississippi, the coast here, the lower three counties, don't understand tidelands and the importance to the entire state. So with that, kind of a big, quick elevator speech of that. And look, tidelands here on the coast, we've talked about this before, but I'm so thankful to have the professor, Ray Carter, just a good man. And he's been so great to me to have the knowledge that he has. We've tried our best to soften Ray up a little bit, and he's come around and doing really good with that. But just a really smart, sharp attorney who understands public trust tidelands, and I couldn't do what I do without him. So very thankful to have him. But that's kind of the general overview again. And really, one of the things that we looked on and started a couple of years ago was our conservation task force, Ricky. And you mentioned the outdoor capital of the world, and man, that's so true. And you know this from having your sons grow up and your family and your grandkids, and having my daughters in tree stands with me. It's just special. Something about Mississippi and us on the coast here, from fishing and catching all the different varieties that we can catch here, up to the big white-tailed deer in the Delta, to squirrel, to rabbit, you name it. It's all here, and it's a great place, man.
It really is. It really. Listen, on your task force, we've talked about this before, but bringing together this wide variety of conservation leaders, it not only gives you a chance to understand what the priorities ought to be, but it gives you a chance to build relationships with some of the most powerful conservation leaders in the state. And when you've got a question about something, you've got the ability to go right, to the person who wrote the book about the subject.
That's right.
It's important, man. I mean, it's important. I mean, I remember because you launched that during the debates around the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund. Took us a couple of years to get that done, but a lot of the people who were involved in pushing the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund were also involved in your conservation effort, and that's another example of listening and paying attention and building these networks of leaders that pay back in ways you don't even now appreciate. And I mean, it's true, isn't it?
Oh my goodness! You talk about like somebody like James Cummins,
who wrote the book on private lands and North American wildlife model.
Just a national expert that helps craft legislation in D.C. that impacts the entire country. Having somebody like that we can call on and say, hey, look, you love Mississippi, you're from here too. Let's get you in this task force where we can talk about, let's make one big conservation plan for the entire state. And a lot of agencies, and we've talked about this, but a lot of agencies have their conservation plans, but they don't necessarily add up to what's best for the state as a whole, for all of us, not just my agency, but for all of us. And so that's been our plan, to put that roadmap together. We can all sing off the same sheet, especially with the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund, which is such a great program and so needed in Mississippi. I'm really glad the legislature got that across the line. They're doing some great work, by the way. I know you've been following it just as I have, but really proud of the work that they're doing. But couple that with our plan that we're going to hopefully be able to come out with in the next couple of years. We've got some great things happening in conservation here in Mississippi.
Yeah, the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund has done everything we hoped it would do. And as they continue to refine it, you'll start to continue to see a good mix of small projects and big projects. But
right.
But they're over 3-to-1 match now. But man, they could do a 4-to-5. If they start putting priority on the matching aspect of it and challenging cities and counties and conservation organizations to go find those federal funds, we can really make pay dirt. But we're out of time for this conversation. It's been a pleasure to catch up with you, my friend.
You too, buddy. Always a pleasure. And by the way, I've been to a couple of those board meetings, and to hear them talk through it, that's the great part. We've got some really smart folks, and I'm really excited about their work.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. This has been Michael Watson, Secretary of State. Listen, have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.
You too, my friend. Take care.